would have guessed that, what this will be like the 10th episode. Still don't know how to fucking intro by myself. Still don't know how to intro at all. It's fucking great. But guys, welcome to the whatever episode of the By the Way podcast. This is probably like number 9, number 10 maybe. I don't know. I stopped like counting after the 5th one. If you listen to our last episode, you already kind of know what's going on, and if you didn't, I'm gonna tell you right now. Rene, predisposed. We got rid of him. We don't need him anymore. I said this podcast is getting a little too big for the both of us. So I kicked him out. I said, you're doing a lot for us, but not enough. Not enough, I'd argue. So I got him out, and I replaced him. Now I know what a lot of you guys are thinking. Wow, you replaced him. You replaced your quota, your representation quota for the year. You're one brown man. How could you? Now, don't worry though. Okay, the replacement 100 times better, in my opinion. Today we have Erica on the podcast. Erica, please say hello.
Hey everybody, I'm Erica.
Do you want to give a little introduction, who you are, what you do, why you're here? Because I'm still trying to figure that one out.
All right, so just like Brendan said, I'm Erica. I also go by Eddie or NV Eddie. I am the face, the person, Renee's partner of like 1,000 years we've been together. I'm in some ways true. I'm the cooler version of him, and other times he is the cooler.
And like no, we don't need to lie. I think you're the cooler version like all the time.
Well, but yeah, I'm the girlfriend. I'm the one that he mentions sometimes in the episodes. How special am I sometimes,
I know, right?
So, I just like some basic background. Of course, I'm indigenous. I'm Central American, Mexican. I come from 3 indigenous communities. I come from the Yaqui, the Tana Atam, and the Chorotega communities, respectively. And of course, I am first generation living here in this capitalist, imperialist, United fucking States.
Yeah.
I attended the University of Arizona. Just recently graduated too. So I graduated with a BFA in studio art, illustration design, and a BA in Latin American Studies and American Indian Studies. So I do have some personal history background of what we're going to be talking about today. Other than that, though, yeah, that's all about me so far. And then if some people are wondering too, how I do fucking know Brandon. I met him like what? I want to say 2017, 2018 maybe. Because I was since I'm Renee's girlfriend, his partner, I was talking to everybody else in the group, and Lord and behold, there are often times where I talk with Brandon about, history in general, college experience in general, which, by the way, if anybody wants to, hear about my experiences about college, I'm more than happy to share it, especially with Brandon, who's also going through university. Mine's is more of a cautionary tale, and I don't wish my experiences on anybody else. So, Brandon, I don't wish my experiences on you personally.
Thank you. Yeah, I think our college experiences have been very, very different. But yeah, we'll definitely have to have like another episode where we talk about that, because college is such a, I don't know, it's very it's so daunting for some people, and like luckily for me, because I'm first gen too, for like universities and stuff, so I didn't really know what to expect like at all. The highest education my family got, I think, is like I don't know. I think my mom might have gone to a community college a long time ago, and then my dad went to like some like workers programs. So the whole thing was super new to me. But luckily, I've kind of, I don't know, weathered the storm. I had good support around me, helping me out. including you, when I had questions about shit. So yeah, we'll have to dive into that a lot more. But for this episode today, we're talking, we're talking about socialism. Uh, a relatively new concept for me. Something I really fuck with though, low key, is kind of,
Oh yeah.
is my jam, for sure. Um, and yeah, we're gonna discuss that. Erica's like view of it mainly, primarily, because she knows a lot more about it than I do. But yeah, we're gonna go have a little back and forth. This is probably gonna be one of like 3, 4 episodes. I don't know. We haven't really planned like the episode structure too much, but this is definitely gonna be like a reoccurring thing for a little bit. It's something I'm very passionate about. Something Erica's very passionate about. Um, like I said, Renee's never coming back to the podcast again, so we don't really got to worry about him. And yeah, so I prepared like a full Google Doc for you with some questions um, that we're gonna go through, and then we'll just keep the discussion going until we hit our hour quota. So first question, Erica, what's your background regarding socialism, communism, leftist ideology in general?
Yeah, so like I said before, like I'm first generation here in the capitalist imperialist United States. And basically I exist, me and my siblings, we exist as a result of US intervention and imperialism in Central America and Mexico, unfortunately. um my mom is from Mexico, of course, and my dad is from Nicaragua, Central America. And I'm going to say this too. Central America is the isthmus, the narrow region of land connecting two larger landmasses, aka North and South America. And I'm saying this because some people don't know where Central America is, let alone don't know where the seven Central American countries are, because some people think that Nicaragua is a state in Mexico or a country in Africa, believe it or not.
Really, Africa's a
Yeah.
stretch. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
that's why
I
I'm always telling people, like, no, like, you have no excuse. You have Google, you have a phone, you have the internet. Just look it up. Just as simple as that.
yeah, rather look it up and like figure
Y-
it out than like ask and be like super wrong.
Yeah. But yeah, so both my parents moved to the US in the mid 80s when they were preteens. One was for a test to see how it was to be living in the States and to get their education here, while the other was forced to come over here because of a US funded war, okay, set by Reagan and his shitty administration. And this is going
Yeah.
to play, of course, what we'll be talking about later on.
Mm.
Um, but my socialism journey first started with my paternal grandfather. He joined Nicaragua's socialist group. It was called, or it is called still, La Frente Sandinista de Liberación Nacional. It's also known as FSLN, or the Sandinistas. And so this was during the Sandinista revolution that was, overthrowing the Somoza regime, aka a US involvement dictatorship, and that ruled Nicaragua since 1934 or 1936. And my grandpa was interested in the socialist ideas during the late 1960s, where Nicaragua was getting inspiration from other revolutions in places like Cuba or Algeria, where these respective countries fought their dictators and against colonial control. And so my grandpa was attending these student meetings at the National Autonomous University of Nicaragua, also known as UNAN, in the capital of Managua. And it's cool. There's pictures of my grandpa for him traveling to various countries. He has for sure traveled to Cuba, East Germany, Russia, Mexico, and I believe it might have been Belarus, but he didn't go into detail or really explain clearly as to why he traveled to these places, but I'm pretty sure it had to do with the FSLN tasks that he was assigned to, or him learning the country's socialist parties on how can communism or socialism work for Nicaragua, especially to oust the regime. Um,
Mm.
and like I said, it hasn't been confirmed because he's like many grandpas. I'm sure you know those grandpas who go on tangents or they go on and become political or end up getting flashbacks, and I don't need him to get traumatized again. So
Yeah.
when I go back to Nicaragua, I'm gonna carefully ask him. But yeah, his involvement, like many other fellow Nicaraguenses, it led to the success of overthrowing the regime, and so they focused on rebuilding their country. And what was very interesting about that was that with the FSLN, they were creating a program to outline the importance of eliminating Nicaragua's illiteracy, because it was estimated to be like 75 to 90%, especially in rural places. And so they began their literacy campaign in just a few months after they ousted the regime in 1980. And so there were around like 30 to 60,000 Nicaraguenses from different backgrounds, regardless of genders, race, class, age, and there were public institutions that provided support for this campaign. And so it was interesting, finding out that their goals about this was to have a what was it? It was more of like a social, political, strategic, and education nature, with the important points of eradicating illiteracy, encouraging the integration and understanding between Nicaragua's different backgrounds and classes. Because keep in mind too, it's not just brown people over there in Nicaragua. It's like literally like white passing folks. It's Afro-Indigenous, Afro folks over there. So we're like a really like multi background, diverse community, I should say. And so, there had to be the understanding between these, and then of course to increase political awareness, strengthen channels for economic and political participation, et cetera, et cetera. And so my
Mm.
grandpa was involved with this campaign. So he made sure my dad, his siblings, and my grandma, of course, learned how to read and write. Because, keep in mind too, like, not just in Nicaragua, but like in many places, the most education that people normally get is like elementary education. Because then afterwards you would have to like pay like a fee for you to attend school. And you know that many times people didn't have that because, it was only like the ruling class that had it.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure if my grandpa still is, but he was a teacher teaching English as a second language at a school in my family's neighborhood. I don't know if he still is. Maybe he retired. But yeah, he was doing that, and so I thought that was like personally really cool about that. But yeah, I think socialism, all in all, it skipped a generation because my dad's not political. He's not interested. He was dealing with assimilating, getting his education, working while, hoping not to get deported because he was undocumented at the time. And so I'm the only socialist in my family right now. It's often like that, with some folks in their families. Um, but, my journey, aside from having a socialist, grandpa, I want to say it started maybe about a year ago. Um, I had mutuals on social media who were sharing info in regards to anti-imperialism, communist, socialist related things. And one day I approached, these different mutuals, and I was like, hey, I've always been anti-imperialist. I never liked capitalism. I've learned much on how much the global north fucked up the global south. And, especially me learning the histories of my communities, my family who have been greatly affected by colonialism, imperialism, capitalism, and I've always been interested and want to learn more on the difference between, what's socialism? Like, what's the difference between socialism and communism? And how do I join the fight against, all these isms when it comes to, imperialism, colonialism, capitalism? Like, where the fuck do I start? And so, these mutuals were very kind enough, like, to recommend me, just like, I think one recommended me a book, another recommended me a podcast, and that was it. Um, I personally took it further by just keep on coming across different readings, different podcasts, and it got to the point where I listened to various ones. So, like, for podcasts, I listened to The Deprogram, which it's personally one of my favorites. I also listened to Decolonize Buffalo, Socialist for All, Cocktails and Capitalism, and the Wushtet podcast, which is a Dene or a Navajo socialist podcast. And YouTube channels, I watch Luna Oy, a really, really great channel, by the way. Hakeem, Marxism Today, Second Thought, Yugobnik, The Left Lens with Danny Haifeng, Lady Izdahar, and Socialist for All, again. Printed works slash books. I currently have a long list, but so far I'm currently reading this. I have a book right here that you probably won't see, but like I can show it here. This beautiful thing, Revolution and Intervention in Central America, edited by Marlene Dixon and Suzanne Jones. I was actually really excited to see this one because it's actually a contemporary Marxism series. Um, I've also read Inevitable Revolutions by Walter Lefebvre, Indigenous and Decolonizing Studies in Education by Linda Tuai Smith, Eve Tuck, and Kei Wei Young. What else have I read? Marxism and Revisionism by Lenin himself. Imperialism, the High Stage of Capitalism, a popular outline, also by Lenin. And lastly, Marx and Lenin for beginners. So I still have a long list to go. And, just in general, of me researching the Latin American indigenous global histories that have its colonization and imperialism experiences that continue to affect many of us today, decades and hundreds of years after. And so, you or probably the listeners are thinking like, okay, well, why didn't you read Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto or
So
his
true.
four,
It's
yeah,
exactly what I'm thinking.
or his 4 volume of Das Kapital at the start of your socialist journey? And well,
Hmm.
Mutual said that I can read these to start, but I may end up confused with the amount of info that I may or may not be very familiar with. And so for, to ease that transition, they just recommended me to, these very few various books, channels, and podcasts to start. And, eventually I'll work my way up. And that's actually what I'm doing right now. Um, I think one day I will. Pretty soon, I'll get to read those ones read by the wonderful Marx himself. But it's a very long process. Especially, it's not like something you can just transition to very quickly and say I understand all this. Because like to be fair, like everything that I'm talking about in regards to like socialism and communism, it's things that I've learned so far. So I don't want people to regard me as the person that has the correct information or somebody that has all the knowledge already. Like, no, I'm still learning, and it's like there's so much more you have to learn about.
Yeah, there's yeah, Marx and other capitalist critics like Max Weber, um, they're very hard to like get into when starting off, like thinking about capitalism critiques, because just the way that they write is so fucking annoying. Like, I don't, for Marx in particular, because I've read excerpts from Capital and a little bit of the Communist Manifesto, and he just like he can't just say something. He can't just be like, he can't just say capitalism sucks. He has to like say, oh, capitalism like isn't the greatest in the world, and then he needs to give like 15 examples of varying degrees of like this is why it's not good. So it's definitely a difficult author to like get into. So I don't know. I found it helpful to like get into people that, like you said, are more contemporary and like start there and like with the really big solid ideas, and then kind of delve into like the more intricate parts of Marx and Weber and all them.
Yeah, like so the um, Spotify and the YouTube channel Socialist for All. This
Hmm.
person is really cool because he has he does the readings, the audio books for all these complicated works. And so for me, I'm more of a an audio person, just to listen. Because for me, I get distracted very easily, especially like I procrastinate. I'm thinking something else, and so I lose track of what it is that I'm like reading. So listening to the YouTube channel, it's something that I can do while I'm cleaning, taking care of Ira. And I think last night I was what was I reading? I think I was reading Wages and Labor by Karl Marx, and I only got as far as to like the first 30 minutes of that audio because it was just an introduction by Frederick, right? Frederick Engels himself that was talking
Yeah, yeah.
about this. So, yeah, it's a really long, like these are very long or it can be very short, but my attention span goes everywhere, especially especially as a parent. So, I would recommend that like checking this guy's channel just because it helps me just to understand more as to these complicated readings.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a good place to get started. Um, yeah, honestly, for me, and I feel like for a lot of other people too, to get into like the theory behind it all is really difficult because, like I said, if you're getting bare bones, very beginning of it all, you're going to Marx, and Marx is, like I said, difficult to really delve into. But if you find these other channels that are more like, using it in a contemporary way and like relating it to the modern day, because obviously Marx didn't know that the United States was gonna fuck everything up for everybody. um he may have had an idea, but he didn't know exactly. So it's like, for me, like watching streamers or listening to different YouTube videos. Personally, I listen to Hasanabi or Hassan Piker. I don't know if you're a
Ooh.
Hasanabi head. I don't know if you
Ooh,
know
I
him at
have
all.
not. No, I have not heard of him, but I would
You're
like
fuck
to.
you're fucking up. So basically, he's this leftist guy. He streams like every day on Twitch. He's mainly a news guy, but he's very leftist, very socialist. So yeah, like a lot of shit that's happening in the U.S. Take, for example, the I don't know if you heard about the Chinese spy balloon, quote unquote, that was over the
Yeah.
U.S. for, yeah. So basically, he addressed that, and talks about like, yeah, it didn't really do anything. Like, it wasn't, definitely not as concerning as you know some news outlets are making it to be, on both sides of the
Yeah.
aisle too. Like leftist news outlets and obviously the right are gonna like big it up as much as possible. But yeah, just stuff like that. I think trying to take what Marx, Engels, Weber all said, 100, 200 years ago, and try to form that into like what it looks like in the modern day is super important for somebody trying to get into socialism, or any ideology, really, philosophy too.
I had to take
Uh,
philosophy for my college course, and I fucking hated it. I barely passed with a D, and
really?
yeah, it was very hard for me, especially because I'm going for art, and this was something completely opposite. And I mean, I had a teacher assistant, so I never met the professor, and the teacher assistant was an asshole. So,
Okay.
he made it very unlikable for me. But that was my experience with just philosophy itself.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot more than that, but it's still like, it's definitely not for everybody. I'm not surprised that you kind of hated it. And even art, like, I'm definitely nowhere near any sort of artist, but I really like writing. So I feel like if you really love writing and like expressing yourself through words, then maybe philosophy is like for you. But if you
Yeah,
like expressing yourself in literally any other way, it's so fucking annoying.
and it's funny too that I am very good, of course, in my art field because I do it different mediums, but then I can pull out very good essay writings. Like I've done, like I had to do a capstone thesis for my Latin American major, and I was doing it on the women's revolution in Nicaragua, and I found a feminist paradox. I really enjoyed it. The teacher recommended 12 pages, and I ended up writing like 16, 17 pages, and that's like not even including the work cited. So
Yeah.
I really do enjoy writing, but I think it just depends for me as to what the topic is and what the field is. Anything like regarded to history, I mean, I personally love history. I'm a big historian lover. And so that
Mm.
I'm really down to fuck with. Anything like art history related, Latin American, US, or just anything like that. But like if you give me philosophy, I'm gonna be like, no, I'm gonna need like give me like a couple of months to work on this because this is gonna be very fucking hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true. It's crazy to think like how those people, like how some of those, if we're being honest, like white dudes, were able to like come up with such like heavy topics to think about all the time, and that's all they would think about. I don't know. It seems kind of cool. Like, yeah, everybody's gonna know your name forever, probably, but like
Yeah.
also you're depressed literally all the time.
You
You're
have
never
no
getting
life.
out of it.
You have no social
Exactly.
life
Yeah,
building.
that too. That too. Okay. Next question. Next idea. In your opinion, where do you think socialism branches away from communism? Because for me personally, when I was like getting into it, I found it very hard to like differentiate the two. And American media outlets don't differentiate them at all. They're both the same thing. They're both awful. They're both terrible.
Yeah.
So yeah, just like what do you think? What are the core differences, and like how do you view them?
Yeah, so I thought the same thing too originally. That's why I wanted to ask my mutuals as to, well, what's the difference between these two? Because there are many that people that I follow on social media who are socialists, but then I follow others who are communists. And I want to know, well, what was the difference, especially if there were things that were like the same that we're all fighting for.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I learned this. So socialism, there's so many there's so many different definitions from different leaders, but the one that I keep seeing is, well, socialism is the transitional unstable stage between capitalism and communism, because it can go both ways. You can either continue this socialist road, continue the class struggle, move forward to communism, or you're just prone to abandoning this road and backsliding into capitalism. And so it's very interesting, because then I would find that, like I said, it's unstable because then there's so many questions of, well, what about the leaders in the Communist Party who have, lingering capitalist ambitions and they're working to restore capitalism on the inside? Or what about the bourgeoisie in the surrounding capitalist countries that are working to destabilize your socialist country? And
Mm-hmm.
so to combat these, we not only continue the class struggle under socialism, but we got to intensify it. And of course, this can only continue until all classes have been abolished all over. Where we are a fully communist, stateless, classless, moneyless society. And so,
Mm-hmm.
if we overthrow the capitalist class, which I hope is one day, and we shift to socialism and eventual communism, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take decades. It could take hundreds. Some people have even said maybe centuries to fully complete. Because, like I said, it's a transitional stage, but it's very unstable too, because it can go both ways. And so the main features of socialism is that we have three things: we have the economic, the political, and the transitional aspects. And so, for your economic aspect, socialist countries operate under the instruction of, quote, from each according to their ability, to each according to their work. And I personally see this as a equity preference over equality. And this eliminates problems like, wasteful overproduction as we move forwards, or as we move towards primarily producing for use rather than producing for profit. And there's the transformation, of course, from private ownership to the means of production to public or state ownership, or even that of cooperative ownership. And so the trajectory for all of this is to progressively transition to the full communal ownership of communism. But, this can only help advance us closer to that stateless, classless, and moneyless society when it's led by the political power of the working class. And then we have our political aspect, where, under capitalism, we are currently under the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, the ruling class, which means that the capitalists are in charge, whether that's under a liberal democracy or outright, fascism. And socialist countries are politically led by the working class and its, representatives, and work to the genuine interests in the working class. So then, interestingly enough, we also have the transformational aspect. Socialism, like I said, is the transitional stage. And so society must progress from capitalism towards the stateless, classless, moneyless society. And, this is going to include the transformation of relations by productions of abolishing the capitalist class, for us to advance towards full abolition of the commodity form, winding down production for exchange and phasing out the capitalist law of value, progressively abolishing markets, eliminating wage labor, of course, abolishing private property, moving production to the public or cooperative property, and then to the eventual full communal property as the capitalist class is abolished. And, it's just lastly maintaining the road to communism through cultural revolution or other multiple cultural revolutions, really. And so overall, there's a lot to say. There's a lot of layout for socialism, which is really amazing, learning about it. It's like a lot, though. Um, and so this is where we separate it from communism. And so communism, it's defined like this. So the YouTube channel Marxism Today, he explains in a Marxist-Leninist perspective about communism in his Communism 101 video. And so he said that Frederick Engels, of course the co-author of the Communist Manifesto, he wrote, quote, "Communism is the doctrine of the prerequisites for the emancipation of the proletariat, aka the working class." And so this is seen as a theoretical toolbox that clearly, maps out how to achieve complete liberation for all working people, not just by securing, free healthcare or increasing the minimum wage. Karl Marx says we call communism the real movement which abolishes the present state of things. And yes, this is aimed for a fundamental transformation of society which ends, the exploitation of man by man, as even Che Guevara himself had noted. And so the question is, what's the end goal of this? Like, is it to take away everybody's toothbrush? Because you believe it or not, some people have said this, like this specific example, to spread false information and instill fear about communism. Like, no, we're not here to take away your toothbrush. That's your personal property. You keep it. Of course, we don't want that. And the goal of communism as a movement, simply put, is to create that stateless, classless, moneyless society. Of course, a communist society, as I mentioned before when I was explaining about socialism. And so to achieve communism, it's interestingly in a matter of debate from, different groups of the political left. YouTube channel Marxism Today noted that, like, for example, anarchists believe that we can have a revolution and establish a communist society immediately thereafter. But others, like Marxists and Marxist-Leninists, believe there needs to be a transitional stage between capitalism and communism. Hence why socialism is that transitional stage between these two. And so there's even questions of like, well, what about the communist states? Don't they contradict what's been said so far? Like, for example, the USSR and China. No. Communist state is used exclusively by the Western world and is a oxymoron since, as I mentioned earlier, communism is that stateless, classless, moneyless society. And so these countries never call themselves communist states. They just call themselves socialist states, like the USSR stands for the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. And so communism is seen as the historical development with different stages, which I found was true and very interesting. So we have the different stages of primitive communism, your hunter-gatherer societies. Next is the slave societies. We had ancient Greece, ancient Rome. The third one is feudalism. Think of Europe, after the fall of the Roman Empire. And of course, the fourth one is capitalism. The modern US, of course, is a perfect example of that. And then we have socialism. We have, for example, like the USSR, China, different places like that. And then lastly, communism is seen as the final stage. And lastly, the question that some people were wondering too was like, well, what will life be like for the average person in the communist age? And Karl Marx has said this, where in communist society, where nobody has one exclusive sphere of activity, but each can become accomplished in any branches he wishes, society regulates the general production and thus make it possible for, somebody like Marx to do one thing today and another tomorrow. To hunt in the morning, to fish in the afternoon, rear cattle in the evening, criticize after dinner, just as I have a mind without ever becoming a hunter, fisherman, herdsman, or critic. And that was by lovely Marx himself. And of course, there's like a, this would be like a society with abundance, with equitable distribution for all. People will work as they're able to, and they receive everything they require. Hence the quote I mentioned earlier about socialism, and in their economic aspect, from each according to their ability to each according to their needs. And it does sound utopian or too good to be true, right? Because oftentimes we have those. Well, utopianism expects our planet can sustain capitalism, a system requiring infinite growth for a finite, or how do you say, finite resources. But no, communists are realists who understand that the choice in front of us isn't just socialism and barbarism, but rather socialism or extinction. Interestingly enough, yeah.
Okay. So true. So true. I fuck with all of that. Um, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot to, I don't know. I think for me personally, and for a lot of other people that, they don't care for capitalism, but, they, I don't know, they don't call themselves socialists. Um, it's hard to imagine communism, because like you have these some examples, like in China's like a really good example. um I think because they've, in terms of like GDP, economic growth and all that, they're, you know as good if not better than the US right now. um but yeah, like I don't know, I think people confuse the economic idea of communism with like a social aspect of it, because like you look at Russia and China through the lens of like US propaganda, and they're like, oh well, they don't get to do like what they want, they don't have the ability to go and like, I don't know, like go buy video games or whatever, some shit that obviously isn't true. But I don't know, I feel like there isn't, especially from the US perspective, there's with all the propaganda and stuff, it's hard to find like a good clear idea of socialism and communism. And you've never really seen that happen in the US to any extent. I mean, in the 1960s and 70s, there were some like minor examples, think the Black Panther Party with their free breakfast program, the ambulance that they had, um, that would go around and help those in need, other stuff like that. And you could kind of see like ideas of it, or like in some state legislature today, you could kind of see it, um, with like I'm forgetting the name of it exactly, but like Obamacare and like stuff like that. Like
Yeah.
it's a very very primitive and like basic form of socialism. It's not like thought out completely, and obviously a lot of Republicans are trying to get rid of statewide like healthcare and stuff like that. So
What's
um
ridiculous too is that the US, or yeah, I think it's the US so far, I think it might have been Iowa or Illinois where they're trying to get rid of the WIC program. I don't know if you are aware of that. If you know what it
I
is.
I do know what WIC is for sure. um I've heard of, I didn't know that it was one of those states, but I did hear that they're trying to abolish it.
Yeah.
Or
And
even in like other states, they're just trying to make it harder to get into.
yeah, yeah. So it's really crazy about that because of course me and Rene, we have IRA and we're under WIC, and it wasn't very hard for me to get it for him. It's just the fact that there are some, like, I guess it just depends on the person that you come across on the phone, where when you every time you have to renew every 3 months, so that your kid can get those benefits. And it would be really, like, I had a really weird question asked me where it was like, well, how much do your parents make? And keep in mind, this is when I was still living with my parents, and I was like, I don't know how much money my parents make. I don't know their income because parents. I don't know about your parents, but my parents never tell me about how much they bring home. Like,
Yeah.
that's not something that they talk about. So I had to guess. And they're like, well, why are you
Um.
guessing? And I'm telling them, well, it's because I don't know. My
Mhm.
parents don't talk to me about these things. And I was just really trying to tell them, like, hey, like, I can't work. Because keep in mind, I was still in school at the time. And then this is when I was barely getting my job at the Arizona State Museum. And of course, I was like working like what 12 hours, 6 hours, barely. No, I think it was just 6 hours a week. So that was just like maybe about $100. But because I was on my last semester, I was like, you know, using that money for materials and then whatever left over, I had to use it for IRA. And they were, suggesting, well, why don't you do this instead? Or why don't you have money in your savings? I'm like, I'm poor. Hello. Like, I don't have a job anymore. I'm trying to get a job, trying to sustain myself. And they were asking me, well, don't you have food for yourself? I'm like, no, because there are times where I'm at school and I have to starve because, I'm at school, like, let's say, like, what, 8 hours, 10 hours, and I don't eat at all because I don't have the money to go sometimes to Starbucks or go to the student union and buy food over there. Like, I would rather starve and wait till I get home. And for some, for that one particular person on the WIC line, they were like, "Oh, that's really weird. Like, aren't you on food stamps?" I'm like, "No, obviously I'm not." So it was like all these questions that sometimes they'll ask you, not just WIC itself, but like the what is it? The insurance that we have here in Arizona. I think it's the Arizona Healthcare something. The abbreviations are access, and even that's even hard because then for you, like, if you're not married and like they're trying to pursue you, like, oh, are like, do you have are you co-parenting with your partner? Are you like trying to fight, like they're trying to get you to fight for like child what is it, custody,
Oh, okay.
just yeah, just to see like things like that. Like, they make it very hard for you. And I think my aunt has said that she used to provide people services of that insurance access, and she said there were some people that they deserved it because they really were struggling, they were telling the truth. And then there's people, that come walking in with their very expensive clothes, their purses, and they drive very expensive cars, and yet they're the ones that are also getting accepted for this type of insurance, because this insurance is for like low income families, for people. So it was like really like stuff like that. They're making it very hard here in the US, and that's why it's like horrible to see stuff like that happening, especially like them trying to get rid of WIC just because they think that moms could afford the necessities needed for their children. It's really
Mhm.
baffling. And so when you see other countries and how they handle when it comes to like families, how they have there's basically help given to mothers, single mothers, widowed mothers, to their families. And it's really crazy just seeing how the US is very fucking greedy.
Yeah, wasn't it Spain like a month ago or earlier this month that gave like paternity leave?
Oh
And that
wow,
like
really?
that yeah, I don't think that has happened in like any other European country and definitely not in like the US. Um yeah, each parent gets 16 weeks
Oh
uh
wow.
extended by 2 weeks for each child from the second birth, adoption, multiple births. Yeah, so yeah,
So
and
we're
then
going to Spain? Are we going to Spain?
maybe. Um yeah, I don't know, it's just like it's stuff like that. And then like even with healthcare, like the United States is, with Obamacare and all that, it made it a little easier for like struggling families, but still, like, why is healthcare, like, why do you have to pay a premium to like
Yeah.
not be sick or lose your life in some cases, or whatever your situation might be.
Yeah, healthcare is really crazy. Like, so did Renee ever tell you how much the hospital bill was for when I had Ira?
No, but I'd assume tens of thousands of dollars.
Almost $80,000.
Yeah.
And keep
Yeah.
in mind too, it was because I had a emergency C-section. So it because Ira's a big kid. And have you
Hmm.
seen Renee? He's fucking tall. To me he's tall.
Yeah.
And so I was looking at the bill because this is where, I was under my parents' health insurance, and it was taking a while for the whole payment to go through for the insurance to pay everything out. And so collectors were coming after me. They kept calling me saying like, "Are you gonna pay? Like, where's the money?" And I'm like, "The insurance takes a while to go. Okay, it's not me. Okay, it's the insurance themselves." And it was like, I think they were charging $900 for anesthesia, almost maybe 900 as well for the epidural, because I was in a lot of fucking pain. It was traumatic for me. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then they had to pay, for the anesthesiologist, for the different doctors that were there, especially this C-section. But yeah, it all totaled to like almost $80,000, and I could not believe it. Thankfully, the insurance went through, and I didn't have to pay a single dollar because I was very worried about that. So I'm very happy about that. It's just I can't believe how much it costs, let alone how ridiculous it is with the healthcare. As to like, oh yeah, you had a kid. Oh, well, guess what? This is how much we're gonna charge you. This is how
Yeah.
much we're gonna go after you for. It's I don't know. That's why too. It's like I don't want to have a kid right now because how everything is getting expensive. Hell no,
Mm-hmm.
no.
Yeah. Yeah. That's all very true. Yeah. I could talk about like fucking medical insurance for hours because when I was going through all my stuff, um, all my medical procedures a few years ago, like I don't know, the whole thing was so stressful. Especially because like in California, I don't know the way that my parents' income works. Like they were on the line of like whether they qualified or not for certain um, medical insurance companies. So like, and my dad, he's a mechanic, so he doesn't he has a steady salary, but he has like incentives where like if you repair a certain amount of cars per week, you get extra money, um, which made it like kind of difficult because if he's doing really well, and like at the beginning of the year, when people are trying to get their cars repaired, then he's gonna have extra money for stuff like that. But then in the winter when everybody is like not leaving their homes, they don't have a lot of reasons to fix their car, so we wouldn't have as much money. So um, insurance would look a lot different. So it would be nice to just have like universal healthcare and not have to worry about it at all. Like I could just walk into a building and say, "Hey, I don't feel good. Fix me." Um, but yeah.
I remember I had a who was it? I had a friend that lived in California, and then she moved back to Nicaragua because she's attending currently at the college over there, and she needed to get penicillin, I believe. And I don't know how it works here in the U.S., but I heard it's kind of hard to get penicillin because it's not as available as it should be. And when she went to the doctor over there in Nicaragua, they had it right then and there, no questions asked. Like, if you need penicillin, we'll get it to you right then and there. If you need these, other shots, they're available for you. And I think in total she had to get just not just penicillin, but she had to get a couple of other things. And I think she had to pay like the equivalent of like $5, US
Mm-hmm.
dollars over there.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, they don't even have that stuff readily available here in the U.S. really. So I was like, that's just baffling to me, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. That's well, like a lot of people in California like don't mind taking the drive down to Mexico to get stuff like that, to get some
Yeah.
medications because it's nowhere near as expensive as it is um, in
Yeah, my
California.
my grandparents do that still. They do that. So like for me, I get horrible allergies. Like I fucking suck. I don't know how I'm alive right now, just because I'm allergic to my environment here.
Mm.
And so like
Like Rene or
no, it just sucks because when the springtime comes in Arizona, everything's fucking blooming and I'm just dead. And honestly, I feel like I disappoint my ancestors who thrived on these traditional lands. And I'm like, really? I'm allergic to my traditional lands. I can't believe that. So
yeah.
my grandparents, they would drive to Mexico and get their allergy pills. And I swear to God, it works so good for me. Like I take one, I'm knocked out, and then I just feel magically better. I don't
Hmm.
know. I don't think it's the placebo effect, but I swear it feels so better for me. Better than like Benadryl, because I hated taking Benadryl. Hated
Yeah,
taking Benadryl.
yeah, I don't like it either.
No, I fucking hate it.
Yeah. Long story short, if America could just, let us go to the doctor for free, it would be so cool.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't. Well, I don't know. There was the one legislation change, or I don't even know if it was legislation, but fuck, what was it? It was diabetes medication, I think. Um,
That's scary. I have to be careful too, cause recently I was right there of being I was pre-diabetic. And I was like, ah, shit, I have to be careful. And I'm trying not to be diabetic, cause then my mom, she told me all late too. She's like, oh yeah, our family has diabetes, so we have a family history of that. I'm like, great, nice to know.
oh, it was insulin. So insulin is
Oh,
like capped at like $35, which is good.
no, nice.
It's a start, I guess, but
To start, because
yeah,
I've heard how much expensive that was, and that's fucking ridiculous. Because
yeah,
people have died because they don't have insulin available, and that's
right.
fucking crazy.
And it's not like, a yearly thing that you need to get. It's like a weekly, like, monthly thing where you're spending like thousands of dollars just to get like one vial that you use once, and then,
Oh
you need
wow,
another one
I
like a week
yeah,
after.
I did not know about that. Oh my god.
Yeah, it is a lot of fucking money.
Oh my god.
Um, okay. Last question for this episode.
Yeah.
Um, we kind of already touched on it. Um, but yeah, a lot of what are some of the common misconceptions about socialism that you've seen, heard, and how do you like moreover kind of combat them? Like how do you explain it to somebody that doesn't know anything about it?
So this is my personal favorite because there are some misconceptions I've heard that I'm like, yeah, that's not true. I normally don't engage in like conversations like that, especially on social media. I
Yeah,
pick
it's a
my
bad idea.
battles. Yeah, I pick my battles, and often cases that's not. I don't battle. I'm always in a neutral stance, and
Mm.
so let me give you a couple. So this is the first one. Socialists want to seize your property.
Yeah,
No.
that's a good one.
Yeah. This confuses private property with your personal property. For example, let's think of there were many Cubans that fled after Castro seized many of their private properties.
Hmm.
So it was land, family business, wealth, and these were given to the community, or in some cases, they were the private properties were given back to families who shared the lands with one another before it was seized by the ruling class or the bourgeoisie, or the bourgeois. And
Mm.
it's very funny because you would often hear it, and if you've noticed too, in many cases, like in Latin America, like what we recently had, Lula in Brazil that won,
Yeah.
and many of the Bolsonaro supporters were upset. Bolsonaro himself fled to Florida, and if you've noticed, that is often the case with many of those that were U.S. Like many of the rulers that had the U.S. involvement, they go often to Florida. I don't know what it is, but it's often Florida. We had the Somoza family after Nicaragua ousted them. Many of them headed to Florida. So there are some people from that family that they live in Florida today or somewhere in the U.S. And of course, with Bolsonaro, he ended up going to Florida, and of course, many of the upper middle class, the ruling class of Cuba, they of course them too. They headed back, or they headed to Florida, and it's kind of like an interesting, like I've noticed that a lot, and I was like, well, that says a lot too about why there's so many of them that would go to the U.S. Um, but no, so when socialists talk about the abolition of private property, they're referring
Mm-hmm.
to the production means, those resources or those equipments that create wealth. Of course, us working class, we don't own this type of property, which is why we're working to survive, which we're working to avoid ourselves from facing starvation or for us to face, us not to become homeless. Um, Somebody had this very good equivalent to. It was like 1,000 billionaires equals to that of 3.5 billion of the poorest people. And I was like, wow, makes sense too, because what the
Mm-hmm.
fuck. So to provide everyone with a more, like, no, sorry, to provide everybody with more, that wealth must be commonly owned and not become the property of those very few capitalists. But yeah, no, socialists have no interest in taking away your personal property, whether that be your home, your car, your toothbrush, okay, your individual items, etc., etc. We don't want that. We don't want any of that. Um, what do you think about that?
Um, yeah, I think that's honestly probably the easiest way to like kind of break down that question or that like critique is like we don't, you know, socialists, communists, they don't care about it's dividing the idea between um personal and private property because
I,
a lot of people think it's the same thing, but like nobody's gonna come and like take your house from you, you know, like nobody's gonna do that probably unless you're, you know, unless you have like five of them, then they might
yeah.
take one of your houses. um
Keep in
but yeah, I
mind,
think
what is it like? Keep in mind too. There was when it comes to, private property too. Many of those of the bourgeois and the ruling class, their family business often had to do with slavery. And so it's also too why they get so upset when they say stuff like that as to like, oh, the FSLN, they took away my lands, they took away my family business. Well, yeah, because your family business was fucking doing slavery. Same thing with Cuba. Hello.
yeah, isn't that's like a big critique in like Brazil too, right? Because
Yeah.
I've been so I'm in a comparative politics class, or well I was I'm by the time this episode comes out I will be out of that class, but basically we were comparing Nigeria, uh India, Indonesia, and Brazil, and we just went over Brazil, and a lot of like the reason that Brazil has so many people, so many impoverished people, is because um you know a lot of these farmers, or like not farmers but like landowners that happen to be farms, they control like, you know, hundreds of square miles of this land, and they don't like provide any of the like they're not giving jobs to any of the people that like really need it, like of all the impoverished people. They're not asking them to help work the land, they're not providing their food for any of them, and a lot of it's like sugarcane, and sugarcane is just a cash crop, like you can't use it to
Yeah.
produce anything of value to like a normal person. um so yeah, it's just like I don't know, I guess that's a big thing in a lot of Latin America. And then, you know, you have the history of slavery in Brazil. You know, they don't talk about it as much, but it's still a very important part of their culture.
Yeah. There's the YouTube channel that I watch, Luna Oi. She is a Vietnamese socialist who lives in Vietnam, so she has, of course, that insider's perspective. And she was saying that there was I believe it was I think it was a very wealthy family, or maybe it might have been like like U.S., but there was a family that was trying to build their mansion right there in Vietnam, and of course the government made them tear their house down. And it was very funny too because that house was almost completed, but the government caught wind of that because I guess they were trying to be all sneaky about it. And they're like, no,
Mm.
we don't do that. You share the land. You're not gonna hoard the land. And so they made a tear that house down. And she was saying too that it's very very amazing too that each, I guess it's each individual or each family, they get X amount of acres of land. And so she has I don't know how many acres it is for her, but she has, I believe it might have been like 5 acres or more of rice fields, and so she provides that for her, like for herself, for the community. She takes it to other places that are in need, that are in need of getting food. So it's stuff like that. And so I was very happy to see that family, they had to tear down that house because yeah, no, we don't want that.
Yeah, very very important for sure.
Yeah. So this is
Uh,
this what is it? This is the second
mhm.
misconception. Socialists are against democracy and they're all for a dictatorship. Yeah, no. Um, a two-party democratic system under capitalism is a dictatorship for the rich or of the rich. So under it, working people create wealth, but capitalists who own the corporations and the banks, they it's like they have all that economic power and they use it to control politics. And the fact never changes that even if we have the right to vote, we vote who's going to oppress us next, while all the important decisions are made in executive boardrooms. So
Mhm.
under socialism, vast resources can't be privately hoarded. They're used and they are used and distributed according to the working class in organizations' decisions themselves. They all have to work together, all have to agree or talk about making these decisions. Not It's not just the ruling class themselves who have to do it in a boardroom where oftentimes you don't know what the discussion is being talked about. So no, we're not for a dictatorship. I mean, come on. Really?
Yeah, it's kind of I think a lot of people or a lot of people in politics try to misconstrue fascism with socialism and communism. They're all kind of like the same thing, at least to people on the right. Um, so a lot of the time they'll hear like the redistribution of land, and they'll think, oh well, like only a fascist would do that, like who are you going to redistribute it to? That's something that I earned, my family earned, whatever. But in reality, that's not the case. That's not exactly what they're doing. But that's a whole different thing too, because like the I don't know. I think the politics of socialism and the economics of socialism and the politics of socialism are one. They're similar, but I don't know. They're seeking different things to some extent. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. It's a very complex topic to
Yeah,
say
it
the
is.
least.
And so this is the third one. Under socialism, there is no incentive to work. Of course,
Mm.
under capitalism, the richest people are the ones who don't work at all. Like they don't. They're the Kim or yeah, they're the ones that Kim Kardashian should be yelling at for them to work their get up on their ass and work.
So true.
But
So true.
so the main incentive to work under capitalism, of course, is of the threat of us being fired, homeless, facing starvation, everything like that. The least productive members of society are the bankers, the CEOs, they're the ones who are growing obscenely wealthy while the working class live paycheck to paycheck. Of course, socialism rewards hard work. The working class controls the means of production and fruits of its own labor, and it has a real stake in the realization of its full capacity to produce. A person is paid according to the work that they're doing, which is, very true.
Hmm. Yeah, I forget what book it is. I was listening to this audiobook a while ago. Um, that was talking about socialism, and they used this example. It's the Socialist Manifesto by Bhaskar Sankara. Um, I haven't finished it, but because it's like a fucking 8 hour Audible read, and I don't know. I need to if I'm gonna start getting into reading, I need to focus on books that are like 2 to 3 hours long, not like 10 to 12. Um, but yeah, basically he used this like example of um like a factory that produces like soup. like canned soup. And basically it was like, well, under capitalism, if you're working, no matter where you're working on the production line, you're making, $12 an hour, even less federally, a little bit more depending on what state you live in, but we'll say 12. You're getting $12 an hour. If you work really hard, you might get a raise to like 15. You might hit minimum wage in California. But under socialism, the whole pay structure looks completely different. There's no owner who's getting paid, tens of millions of dollars for like doing nothing. But instead, depending on where you are on the line, what you're doing for the company exactly, you as like an entry level worker might be getting like $100, $200 just for, working on the line. Or even if you're just like janitorial or whatever, you're still making like 60, 70, $80 for that, because all of the money that the company's making isn't going directly to like 2 or 3 people at the very top.
Very
So it's
true.
it's a lot more about just like redistribution. I think the ideas behind socialism is like redistribution, making it a more level playing field instead of what we have now, which is like the upper class, those who own the means of production, and those who work to try to obtain the means of production. But in reality, that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah. And so, moving on to the fourth misconception, socialists don't respect freedom of religion. Well, socialists consider religion to be more of a private matter, and they're actively against the discrimination on the basis of religion. Of course, Karl Marx never called to ban religion. He just pointed out how historically religious institutions discourage people from fighting against oppression. And, those people were instructed, those of the poor and the working class, to wait for a better afterlife. Of course, there's been movements that have used religious ideology while struggling, for that, for a better world. And yeah, while many socialists are atheists, they do welcome people of all faith backgrounds that want to join in on that revolution, the fight against capitalism.
Yeah. Rene and I don't know if it was the last episode, so the one that you haven't seen yet, or if it was the one before that. Oh yeah, it was like when I was in my little philosophy arc for like a weekend where I got fucking mad depressed. Yeah, I don't know. Personally, I don't know how I feel about religion, but Max Weber, the guy that I talked about earlier in this episode, he draws a lot of parallels to or from Protestantism to capitalism, because, and while I talk about this, I could bring up my notes really quick, but long story short, Marx saw this, or sorry, well, yeah, Marx, Weber saw this connection, or Max, it's Max Weber, saw this connection between, religion and how it tied into capitalism and bureaucracy and a lot of ideas like that, where you're basically, let me see if I could bring up my notes real quick. Okay, yeah. So, a lot of what Weber believed was like during the Protestant Reformation, he saw a lot of churches and a lot of individuals speaking for like aestheticism, I think is how you say it, which is basically, in the living world, in the world that we're in right now, you shouldn't like be vying for like material goods, which is interesting because if you press that idea a little further, it's still Protestantism still drives the idea of wealth. So like in in their ideology and their views, if you can make a lot of money and you're a successful business person or whatever, that's like a favor from God. Like God is looking down on you and thinking highly of you. That's why you have so much money.
Oh
Which I
man.
don't, yeah, which don't, I don't know. I think so basically these ideas led to like the growth of capitalism in the Western world. Because that was like his what he was trying to figure out is like, why did capitalism get so established in the West and it didn't in the South, or like the global South? Because the global South still, they were more developed than the West, at least initially, but then, something changed to where the West is like, super industrialized, GDP is insane, yada yada. Um, so yeah, he basically drew the tie from like Protestantism to capitalism and how they like feed into each other. Um, Long story short, I don't know. I still don't know how I feel about religion, especially when like talking about socialism and stuff, because I feel like it's kind of is somewhat at odds, but at the same time, I don't think anybody's gonna say like, yeah, you can't practice that. We're not about that.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. I mean, I'm not religious at all. Like, I don't know if Renee has told you, but like I'm currently taking my confirmation classes. So that means I have
You
to
might have said
attend.
something.
Yeah. Well, I'm just doing it just so that just so that our kid can be baptized and be like, okay, get it over with, like that's it. And then if our kid wants to be religious, practice the faith, or just not at all, or wants to go into another religion, oh, that's fine. That's fine with him. Um, I'm just doing it just so that there can be a final, like, we can bury the hatchet because my family has been asking me, when is he gonna get baptized? Are you gonna baptize them? I'm like, you know what? Like, me and Renee have agreed we don't mind a baptizing Ira. It's just that like whatever he wants to do afterwards, that is totally up to him. Cause um, like I said, I'm not religious. My family's not really religious, believe it or not. It's just that like there are like since I'm Catholic. I'm pretty sure Renee's family is Catholic too, but it's just the fact that we're just like no, like we see the hypocrisy when it comes to the fucking Catholic Church. Like yeah, there are some there I would say I think I only believe in like four saints, but and it's also because too like of course keep in mind that like in Nicaragua we have what is it Maria, and she's like you know Mexico's version of Guadalupe. And so I'm like, oh, okay, well, for these two ladies, I do believe in because they have ties to my family's countries. And then, of course, it's funny because, of course, Ira's middle name is Jude. And so some people thought that we named him after Saint Jude, but in reality, it was because of the Beatles and of Johnny Cash. So we're like, yeah, of course, we're all for Saint Jude.
Yeah,
But
why not?
yeah, but no, and then just because too, like me and Renee coming from indigenous backgrounds, we just believe in our traditional storytellings. Like we believe in our respective communities, creators. We believe in like those origin stories, and we believe in the people that are a part of that. Yeah, for sure, you know. But just in general, like religion is very interesting because sometimes I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not down with this, or it's very uncomfortable because me going to me having to go to mass because we're supposed to go. Um, Me and my sister we realize how bad it is just because there's so many talks about like um the Catholic Church. Our instructors are saying like, oh yeah, like it's people that are pro-choice. It's really interesting because we are supposed to be pro-life. They talk about all these things like, oh yeah, being on birth control is a sin. going through abortion is a sin, and I'm like, well, shit, sorry, I'm on fucking birth control because I don't want to be popping kids because to them, it justifies it as to you can't, it's a sin to be on birth control because then it means you're not doing God's way as to having more kids and repopulating the earth. I'm like, well, have you seen this fucking world right now?
Yeah, bro,
We're
enough
going
enough
downhill.
like so many other people have got it down. Like that one family that has like 18 kids. Like
Oh, I know.
yeah, like bro, they got mine, okay? Like I don't need to participate. They got plenty. They could have my spot, you know? Like I'm not stressed out about it.
Yeah, it's it,
Uh
it's
yeah.
fucking weird, and I hate it sometimes because me and my sister were always like every time our instructors say shit like that, we just always look at each other and we're just like, what the fuck is this? Like we're just here just to get the confirmation, signed, and then just be like, okay, whatever, that's it. But it's
Mm.
just oh my god, like the fact that we I have to sit for like 2 hours almost every Sunday hearing about even like far right shit. It's fucking I fucking hate it. It's uncomfortable for me because like they have groups in the Catholic Church like the Knights of Columbus, the Catholic Daughters, I think, of America. It's horrible just because everything that they preach that they believe in is so of course it's starkly different from like the stuff that I believe in. I'm like, yeah, I don't fuck with that at all. Like I hate being there some like for the most part. Other times I'm like, okay, they didn't mention anything about, like the far right or the very like anti, like them being anti-abortion. It's like, okay, there are some days it's like, okay, cool. They didn't mention it. Other times I'm like, why do we always have to bring this up? This is annoying. It's fucking weird. Brandon, sometimes I'm like, oh, I hate it. I hate being here.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Technically, by like association, I'm Mormon, which is really funny because like I don't know anything about the Mormon religion. I don't know anything really about any religion at all. I've never been in a church, or maybe I've been inside a church once, and that was like to get like my picture taken for like baseball, for my little league. So yeah,
Oh
like
my god.
I don't know. I'm so lost on like faith in general. Like and with that, like I'm not gonna say, oh, everything you say is like fucking dumb. Why would I believe in Mormonism? Or well, Mormonism is kind of fucking dumb, but like Christianity, uh Islam, Judaism, like all that, like sure, like I don't know, do you, like as long as I don't have to like pretend to care about it, then we're cool, just like have fun, speak your truth.
From the art history perspective, for me, seeing the structure, the architecture of certain churches, I'm like, oh, that's nice. That's pretty cool. But like, for me to believe in it, I'm like, you're talking to a brown person, whose peoples were forced to believe in this stuff and they were killed for it. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
it
really fuck with it.
yeah, it's weird to like be in that position, especially
I did tell my
knowing the history.
I did tell my dad that if we go to Germany, I was like I actually do want to go visit like whatever like if they have cathedrals maybe if they're still
They
standing,
do.
but
I
like
think they do. Yeah.
I was like I appreciate the architecture because art history I'm like yes I love it, but like in general for like religion wise I'm like I don't know I don't like it.
Yeah, religious architecture outside of the United States is pretty cool to like look at and like be a part of, like to walk in or whatever. But like I don't know. That's about it.
Yeah.
That's the only thing where I could be like, you know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe this shit does look cool. Maybe
Yeah.
I can be a part of that. Everything else, like what you're saying, I don't know. Like that's a lot. But I'll look at your pretty buildings for sure.
Yeah. So this is the next misconception. Socialism collapsed when the Soviet Union collapsed. Obviously not, because we're here. But
So true.
uh,
We are here.
as a concept, socialism isn't dependent on any single state. It's gonna exist as long as the exploitative system of capitalism exists. And of course, it existed before the Soviet Union, and it continues to exist after today. So it's a theory of how to organize society in a way that's going to eliminate scarcity and puts producers in control. There are a few governments that exist that are trying to build socialism. Of course, Cuba is a country impoverished by colonialism, but it is an example of what can be accomplished when resources of society are used to meet the people's needs as opposed to enriching the capitalist class. I mean, hey, I fuck with Cuba a lot. I would like to go visit one day. But, there's other countries that have already established socialism or they're also like in the progress of building socialism. So, like, I know that there's places like Vietnam. I believe it might be Laos. Of course, we have China, Algeria, Nicaragua, the DPRK. Of course, if people are not aware of what that is, that's the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Or if you just want to call it North Korea, then all right. But DPRK. And then of course Bangladesh, I believe. But no, the Soviet Union was the first experiment of poor working people taking power. And of course, I mean, despite its own contradictions, it did provide universal health care, free education, right to a job, free childcare, guaranteed maternity leave, et cetera, et cetera. All of these really cool things, though.
So true. So true. Yeah. So socialism. Well, you can't kill an ideology, as
Yeah.
said by several Black Panther Party members. You can
Yeah.
kill the man, but you can't kill the. Or what is it's you could kill something, but you can't kill the revolution. I forget exactly how the line goes, but
I know which one you're
um,
talking about, but I can't think of it either.
yeah. We're at like an hour and a half. Do we want to call it there, and we'll come back to this at a later date?
We could, yes, we could, because I do have like three more misconceptions, but those ones will take a while too. So
Yeah, I'm looking at that. The last. Oh my god. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
yes, it's great.
we'll get back to this. We'll rework the Google Doc to like kind of facilitate the questions next time. But yeah, there's so much more to talk about. There's like more examples I want to bring in. You brought up Vietnam. Definitely want to talk about that. We still got to talk about imperialism in general. So yeah, I don't know if it'll be the episode after this. Honestly, I'm gonna try to, cause like the way that I'm seeing it, we have the episode for this Tuesday. Then we have this current episode that we're recording now that's gonna come out while I'm on spring break, and then we don't have one for the week after that. So I don't know. I was gonna tell Rene that he should like do something by himself or like with you or something, but we'll see. Regardless, we will have a part 2 to this for sure. Probably a part 3 um in the near future for sure.
Yeah, because this is a lot of stuff. And when I say that socialism is not just like one thing or communism is one thing, no, it's like so much, and that's why I was like, I feel bad that I have written down almost 30 pages of stuff for Brandon, but it's because there's so many things about these that you're not going to be able to memorize it right off the bat. It's crazy,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
guys,
So
if
true.
guys, if you guys really fuck with socialism or communism, I mean, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
everybody
we'll
hates
see you in the next
capitalism.
one. Yeah, yeah, you can't like capitalism. It's like you're kind of a loser if you still like capitalism at this point. Like, let's be real. It's kind of it had its
if
time, and now it's done.
if anybody fucks with capitalism, especially how we're in the late stage capitalism,
Stop listening to the fucking podcast, okay? Don't
yeah.
talk to us. Yeah, the fuck off. Long story short.
This is an anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist podcast, you greedy fucks. So,
So true. So fucking true. All right. Well, thank you, Erica, for being here. It was very fun. Like I said, we'll definitely do this again, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode. Thanks for listening.
see ya.